Hello, everyone. Welcome to Don't Erase My Identity, a podcast dedicated to discussing and raising awareness on the importance of equity and belongingness. My name is Kara Sia, and we are thrilled today to have Miss Hannah Memon with us. Is that how you pronounce her name before we
Yeah,
start?
yeah.
Okay. Ms. Hana Memon is a technologist, activist, and advocate for ethical innovations who harness technology to drive social change. As a software developer with Gen Z for Change, she has helped create digital tools and mobilized millions, from campaigns pushing Congress towards a Gaza ceasefire to projects challenging corporate labor abuses. For example, Major League Hacking's top 50 hackers for her early work on social good apps like Aurora. Hannah continues to push the boundaries of what young coders can do for justice. Most recently, as a fellow with Ethical Tech Project, she has worked alongside industry leaders to shape conversations around accountability and innovation in AI, whether coding scalable activist tools and advocating for ethical AI. She has represented a new generation of leaders, proving that technology in the right hands can be a force of equity. Thank you so much for being here today with us, Miss Hannah Memon.
Thank you so much for having me. That was such an awesome introduction. So I really appreciate you kind of narrowing it all down. I feel like you did such a good job talking about everything.
Thank you. Maybe we can jump right into your work as we just introduced and how you've how your work came to be. And I know that as a Muslim American, how you mentioned it at ACLU, it does shape you in a way that when you approach activism, can you talk a bit about how your identity has influenced what you fight and the way you build tech?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of my early actually advocacy efforts were grounded in my faith. Oftentimes, every sort of civic or social issue that I was standing up for, even before learning to code and using technology, was centered in representing marginalized voices, uplifting underrepresented voices. And that's how I really got my start into advocacy and organizing. All of it was rooted in my faith, even if it was small, like registering people to vote or, attending the climate crisis, like protests and marches. All of it was rooted in my faith on, taking care of the world we're in and taking care of people around us. So that identity has sort of allowed me to shape the next steps in my career of always continuing to care for others around me in the world that we live in. And it's been a really good centering point for any project I take on or any of the work I do.
Hmm. And from the beginning of your works to now, after you've learned the skills of technology with your, I think you mentioned your 11th grade program, right? And then later your degree at Columbia. Um, so you became a software developer for Gen Z for Change. So how did you first get involved with them, and what's it been like using tech skills in that kind of like activism space?
Absolutely. I think I'm actually going to sort of go all the way back to 2018, like you mentioned, with my 11th grade technology introduction, which was at Code with Clossy, which is a free coding camp for young women and non-binary folks to learn to code. And for me, this was my first exposure to coding. I didn't have technology classes at my school or even after school clubs. And I was really excited to meet like-minded folks at this coding program. And it was really clear when we were making our final project that all of us wanted to use technology for social good. And one of my TAs or teaching assistants at the time was, had been with Code Classy for many years prior, since 2016, I believe. So, and I first met her in 2018. And then once we learned to code, we had attended hackathons together. And I know we'll touch on this maybe later down the line, but um, I just found a really awesome network of other like-minded individuals who were passionate about using technology for good that I really couldn't find anywhere else. Other hackathons, it wasn't as there wasn't as much of an emphasis on social good. and back in my late high school days, early college days. So it was really refreshing to be around such awesome people through this coding camp. And as I progressed in college, I had known about Gen Z for Change through Instagram, like, many other folks, given our large social presence. But it turns out that, one of my former coded Classi teaching instructors from 2018 was or is a part of the team. And when I saw that they were looking for a software developer, I quickly connected with the team and emphasized my commitment to using technology for social good. So that's how I first got introduced to the really awesome work at Gen Z for Change. Really, I've been committed to that sort of work since 2018. So it only made sense to join that sort of organization after graduating college. A lot of the folks around me at Barnard and Columbia were very, I think had like one definition of success, or success looked very monotonous almost, I want to say. It was getting a prestigious big tech job, sort of, working a lot all the time. And I think those goals are important, but for me, especially after my final year at Columbia, where, we were always in the headlines and articles about student protests, it was really obvious that I also wanted to join a very mission-driven organization that was passionate about the same civic and social issues that I had began advocating for in high school and beyond. So that's a little bit about my journey into Gen Z for Change and working in the nonprofit world. I've had previous nonprofit experience that I'm also happy to talk more about maybe down the line in our interview.
Sure. Wow, yeah, that's very impactful. And I know that like you mentioned, Gen Z for Change does done do very bold things with tech, like tools that let people send millions of emails to Congress about Gaza. And I know you mentioned the hack for government workers. So what's a project you've worked on that made you stop and think that like, wow, this is actually changing something or moving the needle?
Absolutely. I think this is a really good question because, every project we do, we obviously record and try to measure our impact as much as possible. But for me, I think the first project I ever worked on at Gen Z for Change, which is technically one of our smaller projects, is called Feel the Union, feeltheunion.com if you want to visit. And not many people have heard of it. It was one of our smaller campaigns, but it was on a local issue. And the reason for me, I think it moved the needle a lot is because we brought this, small local issue in Detroit about, factory workers on strike and refinery workers on strike, and, the company Marathon Petroleum hiring scabs without proper training, which was unsafe for the community. This small sort of local issue, related to labor and organizing and unions, our team got to bring to light and contribute to that national conversation on hiring practices, on workplace conditions, on union busting. And I think for me, that was moving the needle the most, I think, because, what better way to make an impact than to uplift those, underrepresented voices. That community in Detroit was dealing with this issue almost silently, and it was not in the national conversation. But, our partners at Marathon, More Perfect Union, excuse me, connected us to this cause and got to work closely with the team to shed light on the issue. So that was something that I thought, I think moved the needle. But as you mentioned, our freepalestine.tools website and shortcut tool that sent 300 million emails to Congress to advocate for a ceasefire, of course, is something that is like work that actually motivated me to join Gen Z for Change coming out of Columbia during my senior year. Unfortunately, I wasn't like a part of building the initial tool, but currently I can say that the team and I are working on improving it and updating it for a round two of emails for urging elected officials in Congress and the Senate to sign on to the block the bombs bill that was recently introduced into legislation. So um, I'm really excited to be able to continue to working on that project.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear more about it too. I'll be following on Gen Z for Change's Instagram.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I know you were named one of the Major League's Hacking's top 50 hackers back in 2021. And you built a lot of things like Aurora, which connected people impacted by justice systems with legal help. So looking back, how did those early projects kind of shape the way you think about activism today?
Yeah, absolutely. Aurora, you are so spot on, is one of my favorite projects I've ever worked on. It was inspired by the documentary Just Mercy, which talks about wrongfully incarcerated individuals. And my goal with Aurora and my team's goal with Aurora was to connect them to local legal aid, journalists to get their stories out. And as I began attending hackathons, it was really clear that issues I was, most passionate about was the issues I wanted to use the newest technologies to solve. The coolest part about hackathons is that you have exposure to new technologies all the time, and you also have access to the people who've built them. They attend these hackathons, they teach you how to use them, and you get to win awards as, sort of motivation to keep going and keep building. So hackathons really propelled me to ultimately pursue computer science in college. Having that confidence was really integral into completing my computer science program, I would say. And doing programs like Code with Classy gave me the team members and the network to attend these hackathons with. Oftentimes, I found my group and I to be the only all-female team at hackathons, and it was still male dominated spaces in technology are really obvious and apparent, but it's glad to see that dynamic is shifting. But in the very beginning of my of my college career, that was not the norm. So um, I think that was like the motivation of like being able to build tools about civic and social issues that I was passionate about, and being recognized for them meant that like we were doing something meaningful. People are recognizing this as important work and gave me the confidence to continue pursuing that sort of interdisciplinary path. But I will say, after about 20 plus hackathons in attendance, sometimes I learn that technology is not always the answer to solving the issues we see. Sometimes they actually exacerbate the issue, or it's a larger issue that needs to be solved on a systematic level. I believe that's the right word. Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes technologies actually can um, increase that social inequities that are already present in our everyday life. And so I got a lot of exposure into those ideas and learning that technology is not always the answer to these problems. It's not always a solution. Sometimes it's, advocating for policy change. Sometimes it's advocating for, better legislation. And that was sort of another unexpected idea that came out of hackathons for me.
Mhm. Yeah. And speaking of how it might not always bring justice, but sometimes it leads to justice more, how do you think that Gen Zs have a special edge because of how digital we are when creating impact at large scales or even in their own local communities?
Yeah, I think Gen Z is, really easily mobilized because of how quick, we see and share and send information online. Um, we really embraced being chronically online, and Gen Z for Change, we really try to push forward the narrative that you can see this information online, act on it, organize, connect with others. And it's not just about knowing this information, it's about sharing it and actually advocating for it, in person, building coalitions, being a part of communities, and connecting with each other. And even a big part of our work is connecting with other organizations and nonprofits as coalition building, so we can emphasize and grow our impact and our reach. So I think that's a big edge Gen Z has. We're also like the most impacted generation by, previous policies that never worked. Like housing is always not in our favor, and most Gen Z actually is not looking forward to buying a house, or has dropped the idea because of how egregious housing is. And now we're seeing rent prices skyrocketing, and we're also seeing, the climate crisis grow and grow and grow, where it's impacting us the most. So really nailing that detail down ideally would empower um, our generation to act on it. Like, this is our life down the line. Like, we are, some of the youngest people inhabiting this earth right now. So it makes the most sense for us to use our digital edge, get the information out there, and act on it.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're affected by so many more issues than the previous generations that we should be fighting for.
Exactly.
Yeah. And going back to kind of technology and your experience at Ethical Tech Project recently, um, how was that experience like for you? And did it shift or kind of change your perspective on how you think about building ethical tech?
Absolutely. I loved the Ethical Tech Projects Fellowship, and a quick plug is that they're rolled out their fall 2025 applications for early and mid-career folks. So if that is you, I highly recommend applying. I joined such a brilliant cohort of other technologists and policy experts and everyone in between, but primarily technologists. And how, we can bring ethical tech into our current roles. We had people working in government industries and finance industries and,
Mhm.
tech and enterprise technology, and, B2B SaaS is like the little meme here. But we had people in all these industries and
Right.
spaces and verticals, and it was really important for them and me to connect with them to see, what priorities are in their industries, but also how we can work together to actually bring ethical tech to our day-to-day workplace. Because for the longest time, I almost was like so anti-tech and so averse to using technology when it came to all of these very like corporate and capitalist industries. And I still think that to be true to some extent, but the pragmatic, part of me was, and that what was addressed at the Ethical Tech Project was, whether or not you like it, technology is the new norm. AI is actually the new norm. And it's actually better if we can integrate as much compliance and ethics and regulation in our roles as possible. So I got to connect with some of the most awesome minds in technology today. And at the end of the fellowship, I got to create a project with two other cohort members on, sort of shareholder activism in technology and employee like activism, and a few sort of big, broad ideas that we scoped out. And the cool part about the fellowship is like we're all in the same sort of stage and career in life, and I'm still connected with the people in the fellowship, and we're actually working on continuing to grow and build our idea after we've presented it to the panels and VCs and the industry experts that got to join us.
Mhm.
So um, it showed me, in summary, I know that was a long answer. In summary, though, it showed me that there really is a real pathway forward to bringing ethical tech into the day-to-day workplace. There are actionable items, and I think that was the goal of the program, which was really helpful to reel me back into present day, and like as much imagining and growing and thinking we can do on what an ideal world looks like. It's also about tackling, the present day systems and narratives that we have to address.
Right, yeah. I'm really excited to see how your tech project possibly grows. And I think it's definitely very important that like ethics is one area that we focus on instead of just exponentially growing tech.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the narrative, in Silicon Valley today is, move fast and break things, like just get something out there. Oftentimes startups are responsible to venture capitalists to show a return on investment.
Right.
But, at the Ethical Tech Project, a big motto of ours was, think first and then build better, build wiser.
Right.
And I think that was a good narrative shift um, as to what the industry should be looking like. So, yeah, it was really exciting, and I hopefully get to share some more projects soon.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Of course,
It's an honor to have you.
thank you so much for taking the time to chat and learn more. It was so awesome, and I can't wait to see how this all turns out.
And that concludes today's episode on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Before we sign off, thank you for listening to Don't Erase My Identity. Stay tuned for next week's episode.